Hello and welcome to the first video of the Masters coverage that we've done. Not the first video, not the first thing actually, but the first video. I'm Lucky Sixes.
And I'm MattyP from the Paired Weapons Podcast. How are you, buddy?
Very good, very good. And I'm very excited and I want to get straight into it as much as possible.
Absolutely psyched
we got
for this. It's
graphics,
really cool, isn't it?
graphics and everything. Like,
yeah,
I've never had so much graphics in the world.
Stuff, this. Absolutely amazing, mate. You know, just in case anybody doesn't know, Tom's an absolute genius for this. So
yes, thank you.
Very impressive, Lucky Sixes. Yep. Very impressive indeed.
Yeah, and if anybody else doesn't know, I've given him a script to read off of. Welcome to the first video of 3 before the Masters, and then we've got some more during and after. But so today we are here to talk about what is the Masters. What the hell is it?
Absolutely, yeah. People need to know, mate. People need to know what it's all about. Exactly. I mean, there's all this hype train going on. You know, it's getting real exciting. We're right up against it now, and people are starting to ask questions. So, Lucky Sixes, it's about time we told them, isn't it?
It is. But before we get too much into that, let's introduce our first guests on the thing. So, welcome to Craig and Trent.
Hello. I mean, the production quality is amazing, which, as one of the other media creators, worries me slightly that this is the new norm. So if you could say that, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
And again, I'm pleased
setting the bar pretty high here, dude. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, again, I'm pleased you got the script as well. So we've got Craig Johnson, of course, the master, the undisputed.
I wish I had a hat that just said the master on it.
Bad, yeah. Maybe that's something we could get for future years.
Yeah.
Now, it's probably worth just clarifying to any of the listeners, or in fact, watchers, I guess, that only one person gets to call himself the master. And that, of course, is Craig, because you won last year, didn't you, mate?
I did indeed. After a few years of trying, finally made it.
And have you got any master-like... logos or signatures like Nav famously had "Kiss Daddy" on the lips?
No, I think as many people as possible tried to ignore the fact that I'd won, which is part of the reason behind COVID.
Oh, right, okay.
Because people wanted to hear me brag about it the least possible, and therefore everyone stopped going to tournaments during the pandemic.
Yeah, so. That's it. Yeah. How do you feel about being the master associated with 2020?
I'd never really thought about it for that moment in time. And some people would call it fitting. Others would call it prophetic. I would just call it disappointing. But...
Well, I guess that seeing, you play the Rats, perhaps you brought the Pestilence with you for the 2020, I guess. But it's
one more year.
And speaking of Rats, we have resident newbie, I guess, in Trent. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, thanks.
So the reason I say that is you've been playing Ninth Age for about 3 minutes.
Yeah, so I played a bit of 8th. I kind of caught the back end of 8th. I don't know how old I was, probably about 16 about then.
Yeah.
And then I obviously went to university and Age of Sigmar came out, so I kind of stopped playing. And then over lockdown, I found all my old stuff, so I figured I'd have a look, see if it's still going, and found Ninth Age in maybe June, July. Yeah. Matt taught me how to play. I remember my first introduction game against Matt, where he let me win. And yeah.
Yeah, in fact, because I think you'd listened to one of our podcasts, and you sent me a message on, I think it was on Facebook, wasn't it, saying, can you show me how to play UB? So, yeah, no problem. Obviously getting, always great to have noobs on board. In that first game, we had a bit of a laugh, and you've gone from strength to strength, mate. I can only say.
Matt, you're clearly an amazing teacher. You need to be a coach somewhere, like down the line. So your first year in Ninth Age, and I think you finished 9th, was it?
Yeah, I think I'm ranked 9th in the UK, yeah.
Very impressive. Very
solid.
Impressive. Yeah, man. So we've got the master and, the up-and-coming star. So will you topple the master?
Hopefully, that's the plan.
and it's also the other thing, of course, that you got going on is you're both Vermin Swarm players as well. So Trent, you've been playing Vermin Swarm all year, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty much the only army I've played. So I'm not looking forward to the army swap for the Masters, but we'll see.
I mean, I'm debating Vermin Swarm for Masters. You might get really lucky, Trent, and get a huge army. But yeah.
So what if you were to class yourself, Craig? What army class are you? Because you've played about every army.
I wouldn't put myself on a single army.
Yeah.
Like even during these last few events at the end of the year, House War was Warriors, Autumn Assault was Infernals, Winter War was Sylvan Elves. But the US team event that I am taking Vermin Swarm to probably don't want to run the same army at two coherent events. So I'm probably not going to run Vermin Swarm. I don't know yet. Taking 5 different armies to ETCs. Like I think I have played every army in the game. So I would call myself a free butterfly.
What's your style of play then, mate? So you obviously you tart yourself around the different factions, but how do you play? What's your style for viewers?
My style, I would always, and this is irrelevant of Wargame. I've played a lot of other Wargames as well. I'm all about movement and tricks. I don't like raw power. Like it's very rare you'll see me pushing, for example, 35 Longhorns in a Beast Toad army. But the Centaurs was very much my style in that you could be quite tricksy, and it was all about the movement. And if you got caught off guard once with your movement so that you let your block be charged, then you're in a spot of bother. And it's why I really enjoyed the Sylvan Elves for Winter War, because they're very movement intensive. I'd written a list that was based around that movement style with Kestrels and Heath Hunters. So probably a movement-based player, which sounds odd and isn't really where the Ninth Age Project wants the game to be. So I'm very much trying to push back against some of the design concepts in the game.
Rebel of the cause. Yeah,
which is why Vermin Swarm always interesting, because Vermin Swarm don't have that many movement, but they have more tricks than probably some of the other books. So when I am playing Vermin Swarm, it probably gets rid of some of the movement stuff that I do, but brings in a few more of the trick side. Whereas obviously when I'm playing Sylvan Elves, there's very few tricks in the Sylvan Elf book, but it's all about movement. So somewhere in between those two, I guess.
Yeah. No. Well, you're noted for your movement and your deployment, so it's. And obviously, it's been working. What with being a master and all, so I guess that's testament to it. But what about you, Trent? Then, are you? How would you characterize your play style with the Vermin Swarm?
Yeah, I feel like I'm not really experienced enough to kind of have a play style as such.
Just good, right?
Just lucky, probably is the right word, but. Yeah, I think Vermin Swarm is quite
mate. The luck is just the interface between preparation and skill. So it's yeah. Well, I mean, when I've played against you 2 or 3 times this year, and I mean, I would say that you keep a battle line very tight, and you're definitely about the combat phase. So does your list tend to focus around big punch units?
Yeah, my lists are generally, I've pretty much had quite consistent lists for all the tournaments. They've been pretty similar. It's been like one big block of clan rats and then the pendulum and a couple of disciples. Mm-hmm. And the thing with Vermin Swarm is it's quite easy to kind of dictate which fights you want. There's a lot of chaff that you can use, and it's quite easy to then kind of countercharge and choose which fights you want. So that makes it a lot easier to kind of dictate how the game goes.
And are Vermin Swarms your only list, or your only army that you've naturally had, or?
Yeah, because when I played 8th, I played Skaven, so that's the models I have. So I figured, I kind of, when I'm learning 9th Age, I'll stick to one army until I figured it out. And then I quite like the look of the new Dread Elves. Probably give them a go at some point. But,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Trent, can I ask you a question about the end of 8th Skaven?
Sure.
When you say you played at the end of 8th, does that include the end time stuff?
No.
You missed out on Storm Fiends with Globe Launch.
I don't even know what that is. Yeah.
You missed a real. I'll send you the rules for them. Your mind will be blown.
Especially because the last 6 months you've been thinking 9th Age. So if you get the rules for that,
oh man.
I don't remember too much from the old Warhammer stuff. I just remember the dreaded 13th spell that Skaven used to have. That was bread and butter.
I'll send you one of the lists I ran at the end of 8 and describe how it worked, and you'll be like, wow, 9th Age is really tame. And end times Warhammer, especially Skaven, or something
just
else.
Crazy, yeah, just crazy. Yes, so looking towards the Masters this year, are you both looking forward to it? What are your feelings towards it?
I'll let Trent go first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm quite nervous. This is the first one I've ever done, so I'm kind of treating it more as sort of a learning experience. I'm not really going in with the mindset of I'm going to win Masters. It's just kind of, it's nice to be able to play against the top players and see how they play and pick up a few tricks and stuff.
Yeah, wicked.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's almost the opposite in that it'll be my 8th Fantasy / 9th Age Masters, done 4 for Malifaux and some for other systems as well. So for me, Masters as a concept isn't very new, but I always do feel nervous about the Masters more so than probably any event other than the Ashes and the ETC itself. The Ashes being the most nerve-wracking game I think I've ever played in any given year. And I think for me, being the current master, I do place a high emphasis on myself doing well, and I would like to repeat that. But there's also a common trend over the last 6 or 7 years of me and Raf. And Raf didn't qualify this year, so less pressure on him. But me and Raf generally massively overanalyze what people are bringing and try and bring a list to beat the meta, and then get it completely wrong. And that's happened at least twice in the last 6-7 years. And I'm not a massively analytical person, but the Masters is the one time that I probably do overanalyze.
I listened to your latest podcast, I think, and you were saying about how you'd done that, and then you got your list and the idea behind all the different tricks and things, and then you changed your list, so it was all.
Well, yeah. So I was gearing up to bring Verminswarm to Masters, and I really I was pretty happy with. There's a couple of tweaks I was debating, and then I played Colin, and he used Infernal Dwarfs that he's using for the USA event. And I killed his bull, his Great Bull Wizard on turn 1. He failed a 3-inch overrun with Kadin into something, and it finished 10-10. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I did not keep pace with that list in that game, and it's made I don't know. There's certain matchups that I think any list I can write will struggle in, and it's a small field, so you've got to almost plan for any of the 15 available matchups, and there is a strong chance that people overthink it every year, myself included. And I can't remember who I was talking. I think it was Ali that I was talking to specifically about this off the pod, and he was saying I might just bring something that I'm happy with, similar to what Trent's probably going to do. And I think that is probably the right thing to do for pretty much everyone. And if you do try and tailor too much for the meta, then I mean, me and Raph have both had it shoot ourselves in the foot massively.
So it can bite you if you get it wrong, I guess. But do you have any sort of pre-tournament or pre-game routines that you go through? You know, sort of intellectually limbering up or anything like that?
Is this aimed at me or Trent?
Oh well, either of you, whichever one you want to go for.
I think for me, pre-tournament, no, not really. I like to write lists that are a little bit different, and that's pretty much it. Obviously, for Masters, I want to bring something that's good. For a team event, I want to bring something that's good. But for example, Winter War, I was quite happy with the Sylvan Elf list I took. It was hard work, but I really enjoyed it. And in terms of pre-game, again, very little. I think pre-game prep can really pay off. And Jake Cortine's a massive show of this. He's a very analytical player. He talks about his pre-game prep, and he talks about how much that benefits him. I'm less of a preppy, thinking in advance style of player. I very much like to rock up and be like, okay, well, let's start to put a plan into action after I've joined the UB lobby, which isn't always the best idea. And I do think sometimes prep can really help people out. But I also think I'd probably just end up overthinking it. And I trust myself to play on my instincts, really.
Sure. What about yourself then, Trent? Do you do a lot of pre-prep, or do you just raw dog it?
No, for pre-games, I do quite a lot of prep. I like to kind of figure out which units I kind of want to fight against the other enemy units, and that dictates the deployment quite heavily. So I never really go first because I'm always letting other people deploy first and kind of counter deploying. And I think that's quite a big advantage. Not a lot of people seem to, I think at least for Verminswarm, it's huge to be able to see where everything is and deploy accordingly. So Yeah.
Now you're a mathematician by trade. You're doing your PhD in maths at the moment. So being great with the numbers, do you find that you're able to sort of calculate combats pretty quickly in your head? Sort of fractional.
Yeah, I think I've got quite like an intuitive sense of what should happen. Like on average, it's usually wrong, but yeah, no, I've got quite a good sense of kind of how things should go. But obviously, with dice and everything, it's hard to predict. But yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I think that's a pretty good segue into looking at the Masters itself. So if we get on to our first question, and it is very PowerPointy, it's more of a lecture from now. What is the Masters? So looking at it on a really, really basic level, the Masters is sort of I like to think it's the elite of the elite. From the rest of the year, you gather ranking points and things, and the top rankings are normally the top 16, but sometimes outliers can come in. Battle it off to see who's the best player. Is that sort of a good summary?
I think it's a bit like the gathering, isn't it? That sort of the champions from the provinces all coming together to sort of to see that there can only be one. And I really like that idea that that sort of everyone's sort of battling out and all these different things, and then they're sort of coming in and and it's the 16 best players in the country. Very intensive. I think it's probably only Craig. You probably be able to give us an idea on this. Intensity-wise, only ETC is probably higher up on that sort of scale.
It's the most intense single event. I think team events bring a different style of intensity, whether that's the ETC or like a random other team event. I get a lot more emotional at team events because I don't want to let people down. But the intensity at Masters, that there's no easy runs, there's no easy games, and even 1 or 2 drop points can really cost you in such a small field.
Yeah.
No, fair play. So first question of what is the Masters? How do you score points to qualify? So, in essence, you have lots and lots of tournaments throughout the year, and you gain points by finishing first, second, third, and different points. Normally, top gets 100, down to bottom that gets. Does bottom get 0? I don't know. I think it's 1 point. They will say, but it's very low. And obviously, the higher you place, the more points you get. And there's 4 tournaments that you need. You can go to more, but it's your best 4 scores that gets you in the Masters. Or in the end. So there. Yeah, that's about right?
Yeah, so usually what would happen, obviously, is people would organise tournaments, and then they would then put in their results at the end of it. Now, this year's obviously been a bit different because everything's been pretty much everything's been UB. So this year, UB tournaments have essentially been applying to the rankings committee to get approval to be a rankings event. That kind of came on stream sort of mid-year, and then tournaments were then after that they were coming pretty thick and fast. Depending on how big the tournament is, depending on how many points are available, if there's more than 40 players, it goes up to the maximum points available, and then there's a sliding scale as you go down, which I guess means that people pick their tournaments. Is that something you guys have been doing all year? Going for the big ones, avoiding smaller ones, perhaps?
I've only played 4 tournaments, so yeah, I've taken all I can get. Yeah.
I mean, I think there was only 7 tournaments in total this year because of obviously everything going on. So you'd have done well to pick the best ones, really. Pick and choose.
I think if you look at the year as a whole, as soon as lockdown was in, a lot of people played in non-UK events. So the US were really quick set up, singles, 5-man teams and 8-man teams, and so you saw a lot of people go for them really, really early on, which. It took 3 months, essentially 3-4 months away from the UK scene.
Yeah.
And so 7 events for a whole year is easily the smallest number that there has or ever will be. Yeah. Some years, when you look back over the previous year's rankings, there's 20 events, and normally the last event of the year, you've got a big group of people trying to get to scramble for those final few rankings places because everyone's already got their 4 scores, but you need to improve by 2 or 3 points to jump in.
Yeah, and so having only 4 from that, it's hard to sort of pick and choose, really. But as I said, how many tournaments do I need to go to? 4. So normally, as you say, when you've got 20 to choose from, you just go to as many as you can and hope you get 4 good scores. And obviously, I guess that bumps the end Masters score up, right?
Yeah. So there was a theory back in 8th called flooding the tin pots, which was basically if you went to 15 plus events, you would probably hit enough points to get into Masters just by doing okay at 4 of them. And some people love to do that and try and creep in by just going to as many events as possible and getting some good scores. But the score you need to get into Masters in previous years has been as high as about 360, 350. Whereas this year, just due to the lack of events, I can't remember what... I
think it's 254 off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So you could, in theory, get in off 3 events, which I think Amit would have.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, because in our next one, the Who's Who, we've got all that stats and stuff. We go through that, but yeah, as a sort of spoiler to it, no, that's a fantastic segue for tune in next time as well. But Amit would have been in because we had 1 dropout, and he finished just 1 below the thing. So actually, he had 3 tournaments, didn't even go to 4, and because he's a machine, he would have got in. Pretty good.
Which is actually incredibly depressing. Seeing I went to loads of tournaments and still didn't qualify, but you know.
Yeah. Well, you can take all the credit for coaching Trent up to being the stardom that he's gonna achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You better win it now, Trent, buddy.
I'll do my best. Yeah.
So last question of this bit: how many people are involved? We might have mentioned it already, but it's 16 people get through and into it by way of invite. This year there was a few auto qualifiers, which obviously the master always. Because you're the master, you want him there at the best event. But was this the first year in a while that there's been auto qualifiers from elsewhere? The side event, I think, was the first time, or the Masters Open, which runs alongside the Masters, was the first time that winner was given for that. And then also alongside that, it was like the year of auto qualifiers. So the plan was if you win English Championship, the Scottish Championship, the Welsh and the Irish, or was it the Irish as well? I think so.
I believe it was Tech, Scotland, and Wales plus the Masters side event were auto.
Okay, so those were auto. So actually, it would have made it a lot harder to get in. Don't worry, Trent, you would have been fine still though. So yeah, but obviously because of the way things happened, only the Scottish Championships out of all them happened, and the Open event. So there was only 2 quarter qualifiers. But that was an interesting take on it, and sort of added feature to the Masters this year, which is
that was cool. Quite an interesting dynamic. I think the idea there was to get get some of the top players to go out and play in perhaps some of the tournaments that are a bit outside of the kind of the heartlands, and I guess the heartlands in the UK is really sort of based around sort of element games, really. Firestorm, obviously, in Cardiff, down in Bristol as well, and there's a pretty big scene down in sort of Milton Keynes, London way. That's kind of the sort of the epicenters of it, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Is it Common Grounds in Scotland? Is it as well?
Yes, it is up in Stirling. Yeah.
But yeah, so that was quite cool to have from it. And there was, and I say, was it what's his name? Alistair. Got through on the auto qualifying as well, and needed it as well, surprisingly, because he did really well, but just had 1 bad event where I don't think would have got in if he didn't have the auto. So that's really cool.
He was in 18th, so he'd have missed out 1 spot.
So that's they're almost like the wild cards, aren't they? You get a wild card spot for doing that, so that's really cool.
You had John Turner get in this year as well, by the Scottish champs, but he doesn't play UB. So if you look on the rankings, he's not played since lockdown, which obviously isn't his issue. It isn't his fault.
No, that's it.
He would have got in despite being down in 70s, 80s, somewhere like that, which is quite cool because it means that once he's in, and if your target for is to qualify for Masters, you've either got that route of winning a big event, which is a great achievement, or to play throughout the year. But also, if you win a big event and qualify for Masters, you can just sort of mess around and try things for the rest of the year. You've taken the pressure off yourself.
Yeah.
So if you're really trying to get in and you need that fourth event, then you're going to take the thing that you think is best. Whereas if you've already qualified, you can take things like Sylvan Elves to events. Not that there's anything wrong with Sylvan Elves, but that'll be an episode of Slaanrat sometime.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so looking at this year's Masters, if we get down to it, what is the format and everything? So, the format is very similar to how a lot of events would have been, and very much not rocking the boat too much. So it's standard list submission, which means just to pick a normal 4,500 point army, which however, obviously as we mentioned, it's on UB2 as well. So rather than physical means for obvious reasons. Swiss. Does anybody want to say what the Swiss system is?
Yeah, so the Swiss system is where there's a random draw for the first round, and then obviously everyone plays off, and you obviously then accumulate points, and that's put into a ranking system. And then essentially the objective of the Swiss system is to pair up for the next rounds, rankings number 1 versus 2, 3 versus 4, and so on and so forth. And then you play again, and then it's re-ranked, and then you play off like that again and again until obviously the 6th round is played. Now, with the caveat there that you can't play the same person twice, so that's how it works.
So what's the benefit for players like me that couldn't even explain it? What's the benefit of Swiss over something else? Another system. Just drawing out the hat. Craig?
Depends on that something else, right? If it's like,
sure.
If it's random, then it becomes luck of the draw. Whereas the benefit of this is, I mean, typically if it's a 5 or 6 round event after 2 rounds, you would expect the players that are going to compete for the win in the event to be playing each other near the top, and those that are maybe less experienced competing against each other in the middle, and then those that have just brought either a push around drinky list or just literally there just for the crack to be having fun at the bottom tables and not playing the tankers and knees of the world. So it's in terms of you get to the challenge of the event sooner.
Yeah.
And that's why it's better than a random draw. There are merits in other systems, but in terms of Swiss, it gives everyone a chance to sort of compete in the league and stay relevant, I guess.
And I guess one thing, having that sort of level, and what you said as well, having the tournaments sometimes decided by 1 and 2, whoever wins that wins the tournament, that can build some real hype towards table 1 or wherever you are playing that game towards the end of a tournament. In both UB and physical terms, because physical terms you're there for a weekend normally, and you maybe you get a crowd and things watching you. Have you had a crowd watching before, Craig? What's the biggest crowd you've had? Attendance.
I didn't do like tickets on the gate, so I'm not going to £50.
No, okay.
It was quite tense round the table in the last round at the Masters. So I know I was there, so it was quite exciting. Exciting.
It can be really exciting to play these. Like there's a few games that really stick out in my head as sort of almost crowd drawing, and that again can be Ashes or ETC, but it can also be events like the Masters or like the English Championships, and you do sometimes get like 10 to 12 people around the table. Which is great, and some people really like that. Some people don't like it. The only thing to be aware of if you're ever watching a game is that if you start pointing at places on the table, then that might accidentally give information away.
Sure.
And we've had that before, which is very rare to happen, but it's also quite fun because people don't realize just how tense it is sometimes. They're like, just toy soldiers, and it's but if you work hard over a weekend to get there, then it is great to have a crowd, and it does up the tension, but some people really like it.
And within this coverage as well, speaking of that, we will be covering Table 1 last game. So Trent versus Craig will be there watching with a crowd of, at least 3. Including me and Matt. So, that'd be interesting.
So, Trent, have you played quite a lot of physical tournaments before, or were you sort of a garage gamer in 8th then at the end of that?
No, I haven't really been to any physical tournaments as such yet. I've been to Nav's house because he lives quite close to me.
Okay.
So I've had a few physical games, but I'm quite looking forward to my first tournament in real life. It should be good.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good fun. It's really good crack.
That's where everyone's been to Nav's house as well. That is a place, a venue in itself, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
I should have said that's the epicenter.
I think it is. I think it might be.
The other thing that's good about Swiss as well is the wonderful world of submarining and nosebleeds as well. So it's in the first round, of course, if you pull a really good player and they 20 you, then obviously you're going to be on one of the bottom tables in round 2, and that gives you an opportunity to curb stomp a noob is the is the term, and then come surging back up the rankings board from having beaten someone who's only ever played twice before.
Yeah.
So
until that noob is Trent. And you, you go, what the hell, man? What's happened?
Yeah, and then he bobs you off. And the other thing is nosebleeding, which is, of course, if you happen to pull a noob in the first round and then you beat them 20-0, and the next round you're on table 1 versus Craig Johnson, and that's when you get nosebleed.
Yeah, but then again, I suppose that's for all the tournaments. But the Masters, really, there is no bad players. You've played at least 4 tournaments. You've done well. You know, you've had a whole year of playing. There isn't really any of that. So maybe that's the difference between a regular singles event and the Masters. Well, one of, should we say?
Yeah, it's certainly not going to get any easier, is it?
You effectively can't submarine the Masters. You do see people podium events by submarining every now and then, and it's a valid way of doing well at events. But you can't do that at the Masters. Ultimately, if you lose 20-0 in your first game, you can still be playing someone the ilks of Tanker, Colin, because they've played each other and one of them's on the bottom table. So, so it's a tricky event in terms of, normally if you lose, you expect a slightly easier game the next round.
Sure.
That's probably not going to happen for round 3.
That's really cool. So what else about the Masters? There is an army swap round this year. Trent, you alluded to it earlier. This is when you get... Is it the opponent's thing, this one round, in the pack?
It's still being confirmed.
Still being confirmed?
I don't know,
last year it was randomised.
Yes, actually I remember that.
And I got Colin's Saurian Ancients and Ryan got someone's Sylvan Elves, which suited me fine. And then I asked the question this year, and because in my head, an army swap, if I'm matched up against Trent, I should be using Trent's army and Trent should be using my army.
Yes.
That's in my head always how an army swap worked until last year's Masters.
Yeah. So no, actually, I remember that it is being talked about actually in the there's pros and cons of both. Being randomised, it's completely random. Obviously, if you army swap with your partner, you both know at least one of the lists, so you can help each other out for rules and things. For example, if someone's picked a janky list for that reason, like Makar, I guess, which aren't allowed actually in this, but yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting sort of take. So I guess Craig more than Trent. Do you tailor for that? Do you consider this in the list building process?
I personally don't, purely because I always bring slightly off the wall lists anyway. So my lists are never super straightforward. Because that's just not how I play. So I don't specifically tailor for this. I back myself to play with any list, and it's only 1 army swap from 6 rounds. If it was 2 out of 6, I'd consider it a bit more. But 1 out of 6, well, I back myself to hold points in most games with most lists, and therefore if I can hold points against my own army and then have my own most powerful version of my own army for 5 rounds, then I'm going to do that. So I think 1 round over 6 games is not worth it, really.
Sure.
I can't think.
I think it's a really interesting concept, isn't it? Though that if we're going to crown the best player, then being able to do it with other than your one list, I think is a really interesting concept. On the other hand, it does mean that you got to learn all of the other lists, because you might end up playing them. So how does that strike you, Trent? You're looking forward to that bit of it?
Yeah, I think it completely depends on how it works. So if I'm playing against my own lists, I'd feel a lot more comfortable than playing against a stranger's list using a stranger's list.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would consider it more if I was certain that I was going to play against my own list. Then I'd kind of sort of almost build weaknesses in there. That's kind of easy to exploit. Whereas if I'm playing against a random list, there's no incentive to really build a weakness into your list.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've heard a few people say I'd build a weakness in, which I think is an interesting concept myself. But yeah, it's very viable because obviously you will know your list better than everyone else. They might not see the weakness that you build into it. Depends if you can get really subtle with it.
I think two things on that, if I'm okay jumping in, is the fact that it's a UB Masters and spread over 4 weeks. The army swap works quite nicely because let's say, for example, Trent gets paired up against Collins, Saurian Ancients, then Trent has a few days to go away and read the Saurian Ancient book. Whereas at the Masters last year, it was drawn after lunch and you had 10 minutes. And it was like for me, that's fine. Like, I've played every book, so it didn't bother me. But for other people, like I said, I played Ryan and he was given Sylvan Elves. Ryan had only ever played KOE at that point. So he was in a very similar situation to Trent, but only had 20 minutes to work out what it all did.
Yeah.
And in terms of building weakness in, I think the fact that it's a Masters and you're playing 15 other people, if you do try and build a weakness in, the chances are at least one of those other 15 good players are going to spot that weakness and try and exploit it themselves. And I said it's only 1 out of 6 games, so
sure. So with the 1 out of 6 games, do you think that round is more cagey than other rounds, just purely by the fact that you're perhaps not trying to go for the big wins but you're just trying to hold your points? If I can get a 10-10, it's pretty good for that round, and we move on and try and do better with my list in other rounds.
I mean, for me, definitely, I'd be happy with the 10-10 if I was using somebody else's list. So I wouldn't play super aggressive or anything. I'd kind of probably end up just cornering and trying to get as many points as I could.
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it depends on the player. Like with me, I know if I'm using a weird list and my opponent's on a list they're really unfamiliar with, I'm going to push pretty hard. So again, going back to the example from last year, I knew Ryan didn't really know what his list did. I was pretty happy with the list I had. And I tried to exploit that as much as possible.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And you're more likely to make a mistake with a list you're unfamiliar with. So if I'm pushing into someone who's unfamiliar, they're more likely to make a mistake, which leads to more points for me anyway. So
sure. Yeah.
I think it depends on what you get ultimately.
Yeah, and I guess there's loads of things. So what you get, who you get, what armies there are, what the typical matchups are, all that sort of thing. But yeah, that's interesting.
I think there's an interesting practicality as well. Obviously, UB allows for essentially, you can generate, a non-physical army. But last year, Craig, did you worry about sort of handling somebody else's precious little minis? I know you had Colin Saurian, so I don't think Colin will mind us saying he's not the greatest painter on the planet. But I mean, if you'd have had Tim Botnick's Beast, would you have been a bit more concerned?
I think as soon as you're touching someone else's models, even if it's just in a game and somebody's like, can you just move my unit a few inches up the board edge? You inherently are more careful. And army swaps have been pushed back on in physical tournaments in the past because, especially from the hobby side of things, people don't want the models they've spent hours, days, weeks over getting any damage at all, and the only people they trust to use them in that way is themselves, which is fine. And I do completely understand that. And UB sort of eliminates that issue, but I think the Masters last year, people knew that, like, ultimately the Masters, the other 15 people.
Yeah,
to some extent, and therefore you trust them to some extent.
Sure. Yeah.
And not like if the Stegodon gets one shot by cannon, I'm not going to pick up Colin's Stegodon and launch it at a wall. Because, like, it's not I wouldn't do that on my model. Just
with your own. There you go everywhere. Oh my god! Play Craig, and it's like a pinball machine.
I mean, that's what I'm famous for, is throwing models at the wall.
There we go. We've worked it out. Yeah, fair play. Yeah, no, I think it's a valid point. I think it's. I really like it as a concept, and I really like that this Masters has like that in it, and there is a twist to it rather than just straight flat. So I think that's quite a good thing. The last thing is that it's 5 days per round. So obviously, as we mentioned as well, it's not over that weekend. I think that would be pretty tough to do over UB. I spent a lot of time in front of the computer screen, but to do that all weekend, I think I would be dead. But yeah, there was a few different things which we'll get onto in a sec, with different options, but 5 days were chosen. So not quite a week, but obviously still over the course of what's that, 6, it's still 30 days, it's still a month tournament. So good chance to, say, practice the lists if you want to for the army swap round, or just study them and see how they work. Perhaps
I think you've perhaps alluded to this already, guys. But Craig is a very experienced player, and Trent is perhaps a less experienced player. Do you think that having 5 days to prepare as opposed to 5 minutes to prepare changes anything, or allows for different players to come to the fore?
For me, definitely it makes a huge difference having more time to prepare, because I still haven't even played against, I've never played against lizards or vampires. So if I was drawn against them, it's a pretty big deal to have 5 days to kind of learn the army. Yeah. So I quite like that.
I think for me, obviously it doesn't benefit me because I feel like I know most things and have to play against most things. And I think it will allow other people and other life situations to shine. So, for example, Jake Courtine, I've already mentioned him, loves his pre-game prep. He has a bunch of people that he talks to in advance of games. And I think he will be immensely prepped for every game because he'll want to win, because he won it a couple of years, 3 years ago, I think now.
Yeah.
So, for example, I reckon he'll do really well purely because it's 5-day rounds. And I also think in the current weird situation we're living in, this might sound like a dodgy comment, I'm debating whether to say it or not, but I'll say it anyway, in that certain people's situations are better for this specific event. So, for example, if someone is, for example, furloughed, they can practice playing against the army they've been drawn against if they can find someone to play against. Whereas if somebody's in full-time work, even going into work themselves, then they're not going to have any chance, and their first thought isn't really going to be on a UV Masters.
Sure, yeah.
But you could say that for any Masters. So, like the previous Masters, lists come out a week before. Some people went away and managed to get a UB game against every single list.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, no, it's fair point, I think. Yeah.
And the last thing we'll say about the 5 days and things is that we are planning within the coverage to do live streams on 3 of the rounds. So we don't know when, we don't know which ones, apart from the only one that's sort of half planned is the table 1 from round 6. But we will have live streams, so if you want to come watch the games, Craig's offered for some of his games for sure. So we'll, when he's on table 1 last round, we'll crack on for that.
Yeah, we're very excited about this, aren't we, Lucky Sixes? Because we're going to be obviously providing the commentary, but we're going to have specialist pundits coming in.
We are.
Sort of magic specialists, combat specialists, shooting specialists, movement specialists on the sidelines, and we're going to be going live to the table side to Fraz, our magic expert, see what he thinks the next spell's going to be, etc. So
if anybody's seen our Battle and Beer things before, where we sort of just take some lists, have some fun on UB, it's going to be very, very similar to that. We're going to get as many pundits, if you will, on it as possible, just to have some chats and just have some good times watching some good players play, rather than me play normally, which is so. Well, we've got an upgrade. We've got an upgrade with it.
What? Can I just check that Matty said Fraz was the magic expert?
Yeah, I couldn't think of anybody at the time.
Dwarves.
Fraz the dwarf player.
Hey, they got some strong magic. You put them to ask Terry. He does some good magic phase with dwarves. But yeah, we're gonna pause it there briefly. We're gonna have a quick break because I'm very, very excited to bring us the first episode of a series of videos from Jack Chapman, which is Jack's Tactics, where he'll be going through, showing you some tips and stuff. And Craig will tell you he's a very tactical man, is Jack. But yeah, so we're gonna take a look at that. He's got lots of things coming through, and he's got a little mini video series that we're gonna take a look at now. So welcome to Jack's Tactics, or Jacktix. Oh yeah, episode 1.
Welcome to the first episode of Jack's Tactics. In this episode, I'm going to be going over a Highborn Elf specific strategy to get the most out of your Sea Guard units, as well as your Grey Watcher units. Now, Grey Watchers are really solid as chaff units, as well as a good supporting piece. Their Fame Asp is really useful for preventing incoming range damage. The main downside they have, despite being cheaper and more sort of offensively better than Lane Reavers, is that they are only movement 10 rather than 18, which can make it harder to chaff with them. But there's a couple ways around this. I say this works best for Sea Guard, but you can do this with other units as well. You just get less shooting out of it. So you can imagine these citizens, which my opponent here, you can imagine these being Feral Orcs or Judicators or Great Open Barbarians, whatever they need be, but in this case I'm using Citizen Spear models. So you don't want this unit to be charging you. So currently they are out of charge range, but let's imagine that I was a bit closer and I've just moved back. So we can place the Grey Watchers here. So this gives us two options here. So these Grey Watchers are within 12 inches of the Sea Guard, which means that the Sea Guard can volley fire. So should the Citizen Spears, which currently cannot get a charge round onto the Sea Guard, as you can see, should they declare a charge on the Grey Watchers, the Sea Guard can stand and shoot for them, killing probably like 6 or so. Killing a few. And then you can then flee with the Grey Watchers. Go back 11. I guess it would be more like this. Bounce through like so. So now both of these units are out of range, and you've had an opportunity to shoot these guys for free. So they go forward like probably 6 inches, up to 6 inches. So we'll say 4 in this case. So now, obviously, you've got the problem where the Sea Guard can't move backwards. But that's fine, because you can stand and shoot. You can shoot them, stand and shoot, and ideally you have shot them enough times that they become a manageable threat. Because you've got so many extra shooting phases. You've actually got 2 extra stand and shoots out of it, which is ideal. So the other thing you can do, which is a strategy that not a lot of people see coming, is if you equip your Grey Watchers with paired weapons, then they can apply Fame Asp in close combat. Which means they can, and that lasts until the end of your next turn. Until the end of the current player's next turn. So if your opponent charges you, like so, and they kill all these guys, but you're going to go get agility 5 with paired weapons plus 1 to hit, so you get a 10 attacks. They have to take 10 toughness tests, up to 10 toughness tests, but you're probably hitting on 2s. So there's a good chance they fail that. They now have -1 to hit until the start of their next turn. So you can counter charge with whichever unit it may be that you've got, and they've got -1 to hit. So you can use that as like an offensive combat buff through chaffing. So there's a lot of ways that you can use the Grey Watchers here to, in conjunction with Sea Guard, to increase the amount of shooting you get, sort of chaff people in an unorthodox way, as well as get some combat debuffs down. I think the Grey Watchers are a really underrated unit, and I think especially small units of 5 are great for the points that you pay for them. You should probably be seeing them more often. Okay, thank you.
And there we have it. Jack's Tactics. Wonderful, right?
Wasn't that brilliant?
Else. Wow.
That was so cool. Yeah.
No, I say thanks very much for Jack for that. We've got loads of them as well. He's got at least 6. So you'll be seeing lots of Jack in the next few videos and live streams. I'm going to milk it for as much as I can. So I'll be sure. I might show him again on this video. I'm not sure, but yes. We'll crack on with our stuff. We've all had a break during that. We've got one more topic to cover with the UK Masters format this year, and it's an interesting one in that it's what could have been. And the reason we say this is because just before the last tournament, we sort of sent a, as in the Masters Committee, sent a questionnaire out to the top 30, I think, to get their rough ideas on some different styles and formats and everything, including timings, whether an army swap should be included and things. So what you've just seen is what the top 30 picked from all the votes and stuff like that. But excuse me, these are a few of the other options that may turn up in other Masters in the future. There's some new sorts of formats that people are really starting to like, and I think the more we sort of play, perhaps the more we play on UB, these sorts of things are going to come out a little bit more. So we'll get cracking straight away. One of the things that could have been was 5 rounds instead of 6. So everyone chose to just go that extra little bit. What do you guys think the difference is? Is there much of a difference between that, or like the extra 6th round? Does it really matter that much?
I think it just builds in consistency in the 6 rounds, in the feasibly lesser Masters because of the field, but you can get lucky in 3 games in a 5-round event and then just sort of not do much for the last 2 games and still get a pretty good finish. Whereas in a 6-round event, you've got to be it's just more consistent.
Sure.
But it also builds in an opportunity in case you do fail. So if you lose your first game 20-0, 100 points is still more than enough to win the Masters. And therefore, in a 6-round event, you're more likely to come back from a loss compared to a 5-round.
Yeah, fair play.
Yeah, I think the logic of it, obviously, as Craig says, was to run that extra round to sort of differentiate out as well. I think it kind of fell out of favour a little bit when it last calendar year, 2019, because of course the practicalities of that 6th round on a Sunday were quite demanding. So there wasn't. I think that was right, wasn't it, Craig? That there was considerably fewer 6-round physical tournaments. There was a movement towards 5. So I think it's good that we've gone back to 6. I think it's more of a test.
And Trent, have you been in a 6-round tournament?
No, the only ones I've been in have been 5 rounds, so it'll be quite interesting to. I mean, it shouldn't be too different. It's just an extra round, but
sure, that 6th round, it's Trent.
Yeah,
really takes it out of you, that one. Fair play. Again, we've got over one weekend, which there was a few different timing options. So I think it was one weekend straight, which would have been hardcore, man. 3 days, 5 days, and a week, I think, were the options. Might not have been 3 days, but yeah. So obviously the 5 days was chosen rather than all that stuff as well. The Veto System. This was put in last minute, I think, by some crazy man about a Veto System. As I have it, and this, mate, you can correct me in a minute, anybody. As I have it, you match up against someone. You pick an army for the event, and you match up against someone that then vetoes however many you want. So say 2 or 3 unit choices, and then you have to then. So one at a time, pick a unit each, and then do it like that. And then you have to come up with a list before your next your match up with that person that's vetoed off your Doom Dreadmills or whatever. And then you have to come up with a list with your army that you've chosen. Is that about right? Yeah, good. I wanted to make sure I got that right, Craig, or Trent, whoever.
I mean that's certainly my understanding of it.
Yeah, really.
I don't think it found an awful lot of favour with people because I immediately thought, well, they're going to take my Feldrax away.
I think it's just new. I think that was the reason it wasn't favoured. I think it's such a new concept for 9th Age, and really. I don't know whether I'm being out of order saying this. I think before UB, there was I don't want to say staleness because that's not what I mean. I think just in terms of the style of tournaments, there was a fairly standard set of way to run a tournament. You'd add in some different things here, there, and everywhere. So like some quirky things occasionally, like perhaps an army swap or perhaps going down to 3,500. I know Jordan did that once. But normally it is 4,500 points. standard list sets and Swiss, and past that you have a few rules and things in painting and that, but there wasn't drastically any sorts of radical formats. Going Veto System is very much radical from what the norm would be considered is. I thought it was really interesting. It is different though. Would you agree? Anybody?
I can only really talk from like a Verminstorm perspective, but I think VS really need kind of Plague Disciples in order to win. I think it would be really tricky to win a game without Plague Disciples. So
Sure.
If the Veto system was in place, I don't know how other armies would fare, but at least for VS, it would be a massive disadvantage without Plague Disciples.
It would certainly be the first one I choose.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, Craig, you're probably the more experienced VS player, but I don't know if you'd be able to win without Disciples.
Can I go off on my ramble yet?
Yes, you can. Sorry, I've talked enough. You can go.
No, I've been reining in. So it was me that proposed the Veto System in the first place. And I think the reason behind it is I agree that 4,500 flat with the standard mission, standard deployments got really, really stale. And I think you can, and I brought this up on the podcast the other day with Jack, you can just write a 4,500 list that's really good and never think about list writing ever again and make it into Masters and potentially win the Masters, having only ever written one list. And I don't think that's what Ninth Age is about. Part of Ninth Age is list building, and part of being a good Ninth Age player is overcoming other issues and not just relying. I mean, Trent, this isn't me picking on you. I've played Verminstorm plenty and I've leaned on Plague Disciples plenty, but I don't think you can just lean on Plague Disciples and that to get you so far. I think to be the master at the Ninth Age, you need to be able to be good with more than one list, or even, if we're going that binary, down to one unit. I genuinely used Plague Disciples for about a year solid, so that genuinely isn't a go at you, Trent. It's just sort of thought that you happen to be here. I think what the Veto System does, it makes you, so if we take, for example, a Vermin Swarm versus a Ogre Kingdom matchup, well, the Vermin Swarm player can look at what genuinely worries him in the Ogre book and can eliminate that out. Yes, you lose your Plague Disciples, but the Ogre player also starts to lose things like Rock Aurochs and Mammoth Hunters before the update. Both of those went up, so I'm not sure where Ogres are at.
Sure, yeah.
And it means you have to genuinely think about list building. You have to think outside the box. You have to bring something that might work even though you've not got your usual tools. But you also have to, before the Veto System, you have to think, are Plague Disciples actually an issue, or am I just doing it because it's the popular choice? If I get vetoed my cannon, then should I actually be vetoing the Dreadmills instead of the Plague Disciples? And so you almost need to play this extra mini game to get to a list that is uniquely yours. And a Veto System means that every list you use will be uniquely yours. And when you go into a matchup, you lose units to veto, but you also get to tailor your list for the matchup.
Sure.
And the things you have vetoed. So if I'm playing Ogres again, and I've vetoed the Rock Auroch and the Mammoth Hunters, well, suddenly I probably don't need cannons necessarily in my Verminstorm list. So I might look at Jezzails, because they're probably slightly better in value at that point. And yes, Jezzails aren't seen much, but it gives an opportunity for those lesser seen units that actually in niche cases are really good to come through. And I do agree that the Veto System, it amplifies a player's list building skills a lot.
Sure.
Almost probably too much. But I also think a flat 4,500 event gives nothing towards list building. I think there are standard lists you can go to for almost every army book, and you don't really prove anything by writing that list. You prove it by playing it, sure, but you don't prove anything by writing that list. And it then comes down to a point of, it was never going to get past a 30-player vote. I wasn't under any pretense.
No, but yes.
But my point
really interesting though.
Across of it was, what do you want the Ninth Age Masters to display? Do you want them to display that they have a set list that they are very good with and can beat people? Or do you want them to display the painting, the army building, the pre-game thought, the post-game thought, different missions, different deployments, maybe ones they don't see until they start deploying? And I think just bringing a flat 4,500 Masters, especially when it's on UB was a really big chance to do something a bit out of the box, because people aren't going to have to bring 10,000 points of models to get around this Veto System. But to say it's a flat 4,500, for me, is personally just a bit like, okay, fine, I'll bring a standard list that's good. And
it's interesting. It's really interesting. I think, like you said, I guess with UB as a sort of counter to that, I guess, with the fact you don't have to take 10,000 points worth of things to an army, you'd have to build an army on UB that might not be before. Not that hard, but some people, obviously that's a different skill as well in itself. On UB,
yeah, I mean,
perhaps.
some of the I think it was as you say, a unique opportunity, being that we had UB as a format. But some of the counterpoints to it, which I don't necessarily subscribe to, but for example, Empire. I mean, they're in trouble anyway. But if you were to veto sort of Imperial Guard out of the Empire, it really does limit you at that point as to realistically what you can do. But then again, I think the counterpoint to that is okay, go on then, prove you're a good enough player to do it without a Death Star. I think it was a really interesting,
it's almost worth a show on itself. I think, like the idea, just talking about the idea, and probably we've got two things. The veto concept isn't really a thing. It's what you want, as you say, what you want from the master. Do you want him to be ultra versatile? I can take anything and win with it, sort of thing. I can really think outside the box. I think you said is a really good idea behind this sort of thing. Or do you want someone to be able to just show that what they can do with certain armies? Do you because there's absolutely no reason to pick different armies whatsoever in the tournament. There's an argument of it's better because you see what the matchups and things, but also, as you said, Trent, it can take a while to understand what an army really does. So just chopping and changing is perhaps for someone that's a bit more experienced and stuff anyway, that has done that, seen that, and can move on or seen more setups. So I think it's a really good, and with this year as well, having UB and less tournaments and probably quite a lot of new faces and different faces than the regular. Do you want to change it all that much, or do you want to allow those players to get the Masters experience that everyone else has had up to that point? So there's no right answer really, and it could be a pod in itself, and it might be. But that was an interesting one I wanted to bring in, especially with yourself on here as well. But we'll move on. Detachment Armies. This is something that's come up through Luke Tranter, kind of. Obviously, but he brought it to the fore in the terms of the tournament scene this year, and quite a lot of people have sort of liked it. I thought this might have snuck in as an idea for the Masters thing. Does anybody want to say what the detachment thing is again? Someone smarter than I.
So you submit a 3,500 point list, and then you submit 2 1,000 point detachments to go along with that. Your detachment has to be standalone units. So, for example, in your 3,500 list, if you have a wizard master, you can't suddenly attach heirloom to them in your detachment. They have to be standalone pieces. The detachment can come from any part, but has to still be a legal army. So you could, for example, leave all your core in your detachment in a beast herds army and pick your 20% core from your 2 detachments.
Yeah, so
your characters or whatever.
That's really cool. Did you both play in Luke's one where the detachments was? Yeah. How did you find that? Trent, I guess first.
Yeah, I mean, I found there was quite a huge advantage to picking your detachment second. I feel like that wasn't really balanced. Whereas if your opponent picks their list first, you basically got a 1,000 point counter pick to work with.
Okay.
So I think there needs to be kind of a way of balancing that really.
Yeah.
I think it's quite hard to do. So
yeah,
for that reason, I don't really like
you're right, actually. Yeah, because essentially, it's called the sideboard thing, isn't it? So you have one sideboard for essentially, if they've got alchemy, I'm going to do this. If they've got pyro, I'm going to do this. So if their sideboards are an alchemy master or a pyro master, going second's absolutely critical. So you're absolutely, I think you're absolutely right there.
I think the obvious way around that particular issue is to message the TO your choice for the detachments.
It
increases the admin, or it could be anyone neutral that's online. It doesn't need to be the TO. Especially with how the Discord works now, you can see who's online and you can just message them. They don't need to be there when you send it, because they can look back at it 24 hours later and go, wait, they said they were using option A, but they used B in the game. And I think I agree that some armies benefit hugely from it, even if you balance that. To take Vermin Swarm as a good example, 2 plague catapults and 2 cannons are only 40 points difference in total now.
Sure, yeah.
That's a really, really good detachment because they are both quite polarizing things. And yeah, you've got to find those 460 points for the 2 cannons to sideboard it. But suddenly you've got a real strong option against both extremes of the game.
Yeah.
Whereas, for example, what's a good example that doesn't have them? Sylvan Elves. I mean, Pathfinders and Sentinels aren't that significantly different, I guess. So you do struggle with some armies to sideboard.
But yeah. So I quite like. I quite liked both of these and the options for them. But yeah, not to be this time. Maybe next time. And the last one, probably a more people familiar with sort of thing, a group stage knockout. I know that this one had its merits, especially in the terms of being UB and the fact that the tournaments are a month long, because there was potential for less dropouts, although how much that will be in the Masters, I'm not sure, because it's the Masters, But yeah, so group stage knockout, which House War was similar to this year. Did you both play in that, actually? I think you did. So what was that like, having groups first? I mean, obviously there's a bit of what group you're in and things like that, but that's still the first who you're drawn up against first round anyway. So how did you guys find that? I'll go Trent again.
Yeah, so my issue with House War was there was 4 groups of 12 people and only the top 2 qualified. I think if you're going to do that, you need more groups, so maybe groups of 4 where the top 2 people qualify, like sort of Champions League sort of stuff or World Cup.
Yeah.
Because 2 out of 12, you can be a really good player and still not qualify.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's smaller groups, but yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I like it. It builds a lot of tension towards the end. I remember there was one game where I was at the end of that to see if I qualified for the groups, and it was a lot more exciting than any of the games in just a regular Swiss style tournament.
Sure.
So yeah, I like it. I just think a group of 12 where only 2 people qualify is quite a big difference.
I guess the Masters would have an advantage in that respect because you know that 16 people are going to be there. Whereas I guess with House War, literally 16, he was just hoping 16 would turn up to it, and loads more did. But yeah, so I guess there is an argument for that. But yeah,
I guess with 16 people, I don't know how you'd really do a group stage and knockout.
You do 4 groups of 4, would you?
Yeah, 4 groups of 4 maybe.
I guess, but yeah, there's different ways you could do it. You're right.
So just to jump in there, one of the other games I used to play a lot of, Malifaux, I was lucky enough to qualify for Masters a number of times, and Malifaux events during the year were always Swiss. Didn't really ever change much, but the Malifaux Masters every year was the knockout event, and it was 16 people, 4 groups of 4, top 2 qualify, and so on. The groups were drawn, so there was a seed in each group, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th on the rankings were each seed, so they couldn't be in the same group. And then obviously the knockout stage was 1st in a group played 2nd in a group. And the good thing about that was, it sounds awful because if you get knocked out of the group, what do you do? But they put the first rankings event of the year as a 1-day event on the Sunday. So if you got knocked out of the Masters, you could play in a rankings event on the Sunday.
Yeah.
And with UB, I think that's still possible. If you get knocked out, you could still join the Masters side event, maybe on 30 points, so you're bang in the middle, and go from there. I don't know exactly how that'd work. If you wanted to, because again, UB, you can just drop out if you want to at that point.
Sure.
But the knockout games in the Malifaux Masters were some of my favourite ever games, in that you knew it's a very different skill to win 11-9 than to win 20-0.
Yeah.
And to know you only needed to win by 1 victory point in Malifaux every single time led to some of the tensest and most calculated and probably the highest quality play I've seen in games at any given moment. Because sometimes in a game of Warhammer, you know you're going to win and you can take your foot off the gas. Whereas in a knockout, one big swing and suddenly you're at the event.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved group and knockout for Malifaux Masters when I used to do that.
Yeah.
And I think, especially on UB, when people can watch the game, we spoke about that earlier, having a knockout final for the Masters live streamed
would be cool, wouldn't it?
With everyone potentially watching.
Yeah.
Would be wicked. And you know that, potentially let's say Tanker's first going to the last round in Masters, he might be on 95 points and Trent might be in second on 80. Well, Trent needs to basically win 82 to leapfrog. At that point, this is intense. Within a knockout, it eliminates that early runaway and just brings in some really, really tense games.
No, I think, like I said, I think all of these have good merit and are very interesting in their own concept. Having said that, I still like the Masters as it is. I like that it's got the army swap and is very similar to, but not exactly the same to the things that we've had before. So I guess you could go into much more detail on all them things. But yeah, I mean, that would be cool though, having a final.
I think one of the really interesting things that this year has allowed us to do is to try different things as well, because, you know, sort of 2019 was very standard, wasn't it? And you know, particularly towards the end of this year with all these different UB tournaments doing different things, it's given us a chance to try different stuff. And I think people have actually enjoyed it more than they thought they would. I think, you know, if you'd have said, you know, by the end of this year, we're going to be doing stuff like, you know, sideboards and knockout and groups and stuff like that, people would have said, oh no, that'll never work. But actually, I think it's been really good for the scene.
I think one interesting thing, just based off what you said about finals as well, Ardacon, which is a Lord of the Rings World Championships, basically. They get people from all over the world playing in it. They do 7 rounds of Swiss, maybe it's 6 or 7 rounds of Swiss, and then the top 2 ranked after that, irrespective of where they're up to, have a winner takes all game. And everyone, and there's literally 224 at the last Ardacon, I think. And they put a big screen up. There was commentating over the top, similar to what you guys are going to do. There was like 200 odd people watching in a hall if they wanted to.
It's cool, isn't it?
You go and look at the other bits of the convention, so like the actors that were there or the stalls that were there. And that final does really bring, you know, something really special. And you could do that with Swiss and go, right, 6 round Swiss, the top 2 after 6 rounds, have a final.
Go for it, yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's something to definitely look for in the future. Maybe in future tournaments to try it out first, and then see how good it is. And for sure, the Masters I think should look at it again. But yeah, so that we'll sort of wrap it up there. Thank you very much for all coming on. We do have a few bits of housekeeping to do, but that for the first video, that is it. Before we go into too much, though, we do have a competition that is running on all our different formats, and anybody that is involved in the coverage is included on this. So if you see it through us, or you hear it through Slaanrat or Thundercock's Fantasy Wargaming podcast, etc. They're all in this bit. Then you can do that. But instead of actually saying what the competition is, I'm going to roll the VT, and you can see for yourself. Hi guys, I'm Lucky Sixes.
And I'm MattyP.
And today we're here to introduce the Masters 2021 competition, where you can win a whole host of prizes, including painted models from the Gobbo and Kev, lifetime TTS subscription, gaming book from Heretic Games, Rotten Factory unpainted Nurgle champion, laser sight pen, and a free standard size commission from the Gobbo himself. All you have to do to win one of these prizes is answer this simple question. What was the latest army book released by the 9th Age? Was it A, Orcs and Goblins, B, Dread Elves, or C, Undying Dynasties? And Matty, how do you enter this wonderful competition?
Well, Lucky Sixes, I'm glad that you asked. All we're asking people to do to enter this competition, and let's face it, why wouldn't you, with a list of prizes like that, is simply to send us an email to the following address: pairedweaponpodcast@gmail.com. That's pairedweaponpodcast, all lowercase and all one word, @gmail.com. Don't forget to include your contact number, your contact Twitter, your contact forum, and any way other that you'd like us to let you know if you've been a lucky winner or not. And don't forget to keep an eye out for the PTG videos at the end of the Masters, where we'll be announcing those lucky winners.
Yes, at least 7 winners we will have through this competition, so it is well worth you entering. Make sure you check out all our other content on several podcasts, including Paired Weapon Podcast, Slaanrat, Thundercocks, and Fantasy Wargaming Podcast, and of course the videos right here on PTG. That's it from us. Best of luck, and stay tuned for more content.
Best of luck, guys. See you later.
And there we go. What a competition. Some good prizes there as well. So make sure you get your entry in. There's going to be at least 7 winners. So, you know, if you're only one of 6, then happy days. Because get your entry in there as well. We're going to say an official thank you and goodbye to our guests, Craig Johnson, the Master.
Thank you for having me.
It might be the last time in a year you will say that.
Don't say that.
And Trent.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I say thanks very much for coming on, guys. We really appreciate the time, especially.
No, it's really great that you've come on and got it off to a great start like this. You know, having Trent and Craig, you know, the Master and the young pretender,
the apprentice,
in the same room at the same time. It's a really exciting time for us, and obviously we're just totally psyched about the whole thing. And you know, if we don't speak to you before, best of luck for the tournament, guys.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. And to wrap up, back to mine and Matty's. By the way, we haven't spoken enough about your shirt. It's fantastic.
Hey, do you like it?
I really like it. I really like it. I'm a big fan. I need to. I'm in a hoodie. I need to dress up next time. I'll get my jacket on, I reckon. But yeah. So last few things. There's a bit of housekeeping. Before we do have a schedule of what we're going to be doing. Not just us, but all of the podcasts, as you can see down the sides. We have podcasts and YouTube videos and YouTube live streams as we've got there. That's the rough schedule, I would say. We're going to try and keep to it as much as possible.
The pods have all been very good so far. Everyone's got on board, and everyone's been really good.
In fact, actually, on that, I'm really impressed and really pleased with the community of pods and just community in general. In terms of the pods all working together, everyone's just been well up for it, helping each other out, sort of talking, promoting each other's stuff. It's been fantastic. I just want to say thank you. I mean, Craig was on here, but thank you to all the podcasts for all your input. Everybody doing everything is awesome, and that goes to the Masters people as well. I must admit, I started gathering all the information on Monday on people because I want to draw up all these cool stats, right, and everything like that. But I've got virtually all of them. You know, no one sort of really said, "Oh no, I don't want to give anything." Everybody's been really amenable and really getting to it. So a big thank you to everyone there. But yeah, just take a look at that schedule. Also, that's not on the schedule. I'm not sure we've talked about is there's going to be player interviews with. We're hoping every player, but most players for sure. Where on all the different pods, so look out for them. Go subscribe or make sure you follow them wherever they are, and make sure you're up to date with their latest things because it's likely that they'll have a player interview or two in some of their podcasts. But yeah, brings us to the close of our first video, Matty.
Well, absolutely, yeah. Well, I think we're off to a great start there, Lucky Sixes. You know, I'm blown away by your technical knowledge. It's really quite remarkable.
He's got the script again. Lovely, good man.
No, and and with Trent and Craig coming on first one up, it's a really exciting time. You know, and we're at the sharp end of 6 weeks of really exciting ninth age. At the end of it, you know, we're going to get ourselves a master for 2021, you know, I just can't wait to get started, buddy.
Yeah, man. Tune in next time for our the next one is going to be our players who's who, and this is I'm very excited by this because we've got spoiler player cards. So it's going to be fantastic. But yeah, tune in for that. Obviously, hit up all the podcasts and everything that are helping us out and doing it all together. Thank you very much. Thanks, Matty. Thanks, guests. And see you later.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.